Hello, and welcome to an extended portion of the Coach Up podcast and platform. I'm Kanisha Hart. I'm very excited because in this month of September 2024, I have the privilege of being hosted on my own platform by amazing hosts who are helping me to reach you, the audience, in growing this YouTube channel so that you can be inspired and educated and put on track for getting to your goal of building to six figures and getting past the fear that's holding you back. And so I'm very excited to have Dr. Shay on today. She is hosting me. This is a unique concept. If you've not done it on your channel, you can take it and do it. But she is hosting me on my channel, and we're going to talk about what she has to ask me. But I'm very excited because Dr. Shay, I want you to introduce yourself to people, tell people who you are, and then I'm turning the show over to you.
Okay,
And I'm following your lead.
Okay, awesome. Well, my name is Dr. Shay. I am a holistic and wellness coach. I am also the creator of the Eat to Grow Rich brand, which is our holistic practice that really deals with self-empowerment through holistic self-care for the mind, body, and spirit. My philosophy is that you are what you eat. EAT is an acronym for emotions, actions, and thoughts, which is the unification and the alignment of the mind, body, and spirit through our emotions, actions, and thoughts. So our entire premise is that, if you are what you eat, then you should eat to grow rich. I'm also a published author. New books have recently been released called The 3F Effect, which is how to lose weight quickly with fruit, fasting, and fitness. I also have published a book called Flush the Junk, which is a comprehensive guide to enemas and detoxification, as I am a huge proponent of the necessity of internal cleansing as a means of holistic practice, considering, how processed our foods are and just how many toxins we come in contact with day to day. So that's a bit about me, but I am super excited to be here. And super excited to host you. I cannot wait to get to this topic. It is a super, super interesting topic. And I know that you have a lot of insight and expertise to share with the visitors and the viewers today. So I'm super excited to jump right in.
Yeah, thank you. Glad to be doing this.
Awesome. So as we get started today, I think first, just for those viewers who may be turning in for their first time, if you could just give them a quick highlight of who you are, your coaching business, and what you do.
Yeah, so Kanisha Hart, and I have three privileges of what I do. So first, I have the privilege of hosting the Coach Up podcast. So if you are a struggling coach, if you are frustrated as a coach, if you are new as a coach, and you want to make six figures, but you're not there yet, then my podcast is for you. I host 6 and 7 figure earning coaches to distill from them their strategies and techniques of how they built their business to that level so that you can learn how to do the same. So I get the pleasure of hosting them. I also speak on how to forge through fear, because fear so often, Dr. Shay, you probably know this, fear camouflages itself in so many different areas where we don't recognize it's as fear, but procrastination is fear-based, right? Doubt is fear-based. Any of those things that we go through, worry is fear-based. And all of those things cause us to not move forward in our business, and it's really holding our future hostage. So I talk about how do we forge through that fear. And then the third thing that I do is I am starting an accountability club. And it is because, so Dr. Shay, you not only do you coach, but you're also in the holistic world, right? And especially the food world. And we all struggle. Let me not say that. So many of us struggle with eating right and being disciplined and accountable in doing that. And I found that applies across the board in so many areas of our lives. And so when you're working with the coach, typically you're meeting once a week, maybe once every 2 weeks, but you have those days in between where you need help for somebody to help push you to do the things that you're supposed to do. Because when we want to go fast, we go alone. When we go far, we go together. And so I am starting an accountability club where 3 times a week, you have to meet with somebody to say, this is what I did, this is what I committed to, and this is what I did. And then you set your new commitments with that person. And then 2 days later, you meet with them. This is what I said I was going to do. This is what I did. Because there's a statistic, and Dr. Shay, I don't know if you've heard this, that it's either, so I used to know it by heart, and now I need to go back and revisit it. It's either 60 or 80%, but I want to say it's upwards of 80%. That when you meet your goals, 80% more likely to meet your goals when you actually tell somebody about your goal, and the important part, allow them the freedom to hold you accountable to those goals. Because we all know, like your percentage of achieving a goal goes up if you write it down, or your percentage of achieving a goal goes up even more if you tell somebody. But if you write it down, tell somebody, and allow them to come back to you and say, did you do what you said you're going to do? Then that actually increases your success rate for achieving your goals. So that's what the Accountability Club is all about. And so for now, it's free for people to join. So I invite you to make sure you click on the link that'll be in the show notes so that you can be a part of that. So that's what I do.
Awesome. So you heard that. It's free. So join fast before all the slots are gone. So that is actually a very excellent segue into our topic today. Our topic today is around the theme of accountability. And so I wanted to just kind of pick your brain and get some insight on what does accountability mean to you. So before we jump right into that, I just want to provide what Webster says accountability means, and then we can talk about what that interpretation means to us. So Webster actually defines accountability as the state of being accountable. I thought that was so cute, like, of course, right? They define it as the state of being accountable, especially an obligation or willingness to accept responsibility for one's actions. So that is how they define accountability. For me personally, I often see sometimes, especially working with clients, that sometimes people like to use the word responsibility and accountability interchangeably. And so I am very keen to distill down on what the differences between those two are. So for me, responsibility is about taking ownership of the action itself, right? Taking ownership of getting the job done. Accountability, however, is taking ownership of getting the job done well. That's how I distinguish it too. Because accountability, you are accountable for the results or you're taking responsibility for the results of the actions you take, not just the actions themselves, right? So it's like, let's say you were talking about building the house, right? Okay, if I'm going to take ownership or responsibility for building the house, that's one thing. But if I build and sell that house and that house is faulty or falls to the ground, accountability is me also taking ownership of what attributed to the house not being built well, right? So when it comes to you in coaching, what does accountability mean to you, and how do you apply that to your business?
I think your definition and separation of responsibility and accountability is really interesting. I'm really glad you gave the example of the house, and if it was built faulty, that was also accountability. Because what I took away was responsibility is the doing, the accountability is how you did it, whether it was well or whether it was bad. But you're saying I own those results,
right?
And so because we can be responsible for stuff, but if we don't handle the responsibility well, you got to be accountable for that. So I like that. I would say that for me, accountability comes down to probably two words, and it's a build upon what you read from Webster. In addition to that, I would say it's transparency and integrity. And that's where I would say accountability becomes very effective for people. So transparency is, I'm going to be honest. I'm going to tell you everything related to this. Now, we don't air out unnecessary secrets because we say we're going to be accountable to people. That's not what we're doing. But in the area where I say, Dr. Shea, you and I are accountability partners, and I am doing this, and I'm asking you to hold me accountable to this, and you're doing this, and I'm going to hold you accountable to that. I'm transparent. And I'm transparent in that there's no veil. There's nothing being held back in that area, because the only way that we make progress is through admittance, acknowledgement, confession of what everything is that's being held in that space, that the person who's we're holding us accountable knows, so that they can check on that. Because let's say if I am building a house, I like that example, and I say, I've got the contractors, I've got the lenders, I've got the realtor, I've got all of that. But there's a situation where there's a family member that I want to get involved that I didn't tell you about because I want to keep that between us. That's not transparent, because that could come back and cause a problem in the long run. And you couldn't have questioned me on that, helped me through it, made sure I was handling it well because you don't know about it. So transparency is so important. And then the second one is integrity. And so that's also being honest, but integrity means that it's similar to character. People would probably say I'm interchanging those incorrectly, but I always used to say character is what you do when nobody's looking. And integrity is the same thing, right? It's how you are when nobody is looking. When you think nobody's going to find out about this, are you going to be honest about it? And that's required in accountability, right? So first you have to know, because I'm transparent, what you're holding me accountable for and what I'm going to hold you accountable for. And I know all the pieces. So that's the transparency. And then the integrity is I'm going to be honest and say, nope, I didn't do that. Or yes, I did that. Or yes, I did something I wasn't supposed to do, right? All of that, right, is saying that I'm going to be bold and courageous enough to have integrity in my interactions with you when I'm holding you accountable or holding me accountable.
Right. Yeah, I really like that. And I think it makes me wonder too, okay, so as you talk about it, right, your components are transparency and integrity, right? So it's really about showing up as your authentic self and then standing in and taking ownership of that, right? So as I think about that, it makes me wonder, what does accountability mean to you in relation to building a 6 to 7 figure business versus coaching, right? So those are kind of two different roles. So my question really is, does accountability look different for you when we talk about you being an entrepreneur versus talking about you being a coach itself? Like, what do you are there any distinguishable factors for how you look at that depending on the role that you're playing?
Yeah, absolutely. And one thing I think is important to distinguish here, Dr. Shea, is there are a lot of areas in 2024 where people apply the term coach that need to be defined before you start talking about it. And so I'll give you my truest definition of a coach when it comes to, take out athletic coach, but when it comes to business coaches or life coaches or development coaches or all the other terms outside of athletics where coaches use. My definition of a truest coach is someone who helps you identify what it is that you need to do next, where you're missing an area, and they help to reflect back to you so that you can understand and you can decide where you need to go. Because coaching in the truest form is asking questions. Now, I say that so that there's a basis for me answering your question, because there are other applicable ways that coaches use where you have an area of expertise and you're now providing information and guidance to someone in your area of expertise. And that also is labeled as coaching in 2024. Not to say that it's not, it is, but for how I'm going to answer your question, I'm basing it on the truest definition for me of coaching. So from an entrepreneur versus coaching area, it's definitely different, because building a business and that accountability is the action of there are steps that need to be taken. Do I take those steps? Am I being strategic about the steps that I'm taking? And when we hear that word strategic, am I saying yes to what's going to move me forward and no to what's not? Because strategy is both what you say yes to and what you say no to, and it's got to be intentional. Whereas with coaching, the accountability is to a person. Entrepreneurship is to myself. Accountability as a coach is to another person. And I'm holding them accountable for their goals, what they want to grow with. So I'll give you an example. I am not a coach. I want all y'all to hear that. I am not a coach. I'm not coaching. I'm not doing it. I have an accountability club that is different. I'm not coaching. I'm helping you be held accountable with partners or other people involved. But I thought, Dr. Shea, as I was building my podcast, where I get to interact with coaches and you all as coaches are my audience, where I thought maybe I should go back into coaching because I have coaching background in my corporate world, corporate experience. And so I put out this call, I'm going to put my feet in the water, test it. If you want to try some coaching with me, I'm testing out to see if I want to do it. I will do a few sessions for free. And I had a few people respond, and one has stuck. And she and I have now been coaching for a year together. I love her. I'm not taking anybody else on, but I love her. But with the accountability that comes with that situation, it's her goals. We talk about her goals. We talk about where she wants to be. I reflect back to her what she wants. And I bring all this up to say, in the last 9 months, so since the beginning of the year, at the beginning of the year, we talked about what are your goals for the year. We're going to set a certain number. We're not going to set too many, because if you have too many goals, you will not do any of them. And about midway through the year, she changed her goals. So my accountability to her is not me saying, no, at the beginning of the year, you said you were going to do X, Y, and Z. And so you have to do that. My accountability is reflecting back and helping you to work out what you want, and then holding you accountable to that. And so if things change, great, let's reset. And now what are the actions that I help you to make sure you're doing to reach those goals? So those are the separation of accountability for me from as an entrepreneur versus for someone who's a coach.
I really like that answer, because I think oftentimes coaches that's why I asked the question, because I think that oftentimes coaches sometimes feel responsible or accountable for the results of their clients, right? So for example, if you do take it to like wealth business, like wealth building or fitness or things like that, you often hear personal trainers or coaches talk about sometimes feeling responsible if their clients don't reach where they initially set out to go. Or for example, oftentimes you may take on a client and they come in very energetic, very engaged, and then they just don't see it all the way through. And so there's a quote that says that accountability is a love language. And I do tend to agree with that, because the way I look at accountability oftentimes is that it's a two-way street, right? Because in order for me to hold someone else accountable, I am accountable. I have to be accountable to myself to even have a metric, a standard, a tool to be able to utilize and implement to hold them accountable. So for me as a leader, I oftentimes think about, okay, if I'm asking my team, or for example, even with a client, right? If my client is coming to me for accountability coaching because they have some goal that they want to reach, I am now accountable to making sure that I am well prepared, that I am well knowledgeable, that I am well versed, and that I am organized enough to say, okay, if this is our check-in point every Wednesday at 6, I also have to show up at Wednesday at 6 to, be in my right mind and right state and grounded enough to be able to manage and handle my clients. And I often feel too that those are the same characteristics that are going to be required of you to build your business as well, because you have to have, for example, like you said, a strategy. You have to have a strategy in place. You have to commit to that strategy. You have to hold not just yourself accountable, but you also have to hold the people, your team, or the people that you may outsource certain work to. You have to hold them accountable, right? So there's this two-way street that's always at play, right? Like accountability is never flowing in one direction, because in order for me to hold you accountable, I have to be accountable to even have that in place. So my question to you is, kind of with that being said, right, understanding that accountability is a two-way street, what type of tools or methods do you use to apply or to hold yourself accountable to your own deliverables or your own goals?
First, I want to say such a great insight that you just gave about the accountability of self in holding other people accountable. I think that's so important that you brought that to the table. And so thank you so much, because you're right. If I'm not prepared, then how do I really, how can I expect you to be prepared? That goes back to integrity, right? Because then I'm not operating with integrity. And then two, how am I going to be able to help you? Because I had a mentor who said, you must always be learning, because if you're leading people, you can only teach to the level at which you know.
Right.
Right? So if you're no longer learning, if you're staying stagnant and you teach them everything, they're going to need to leave you. And now there are areas where in life, right, we go from level to level, right? So people decide. So for example, Dr. Shea, you've written 2 books, and you know the areas which you have written extremely well, right? But somebody may say, Now that I've gotten this down, I want to go into cryogenics. I think that's the correct term. And I want to look into that and I want to get good at that. That's not your area of expertise, right? So they would need to go outside of you. But in the area where you do have expertise, I know that you're still learning. As science changes, as new discoveries come out, as you learn from your clients, your level of knowledge is growing so that your clients can continue to rise with you instead of rising up and getting past. And that all goes with the accountability that you talked about. So I really love that you brought that up of us being accountable to be prepared and to meet the need of the person that we're also holding accountable. So good. So then to answer your question, tools. So I can't say this enough, and not to equate people to tools, but people are resources. We're all resources, but people are the number one, because there's nothing like having to have a conversation with somebody and you having to say, I didn't do what I said I was going to do. It just doesn't feel good. And it's an amazing reminder and motivator to do what you said you were going to do. So people are the number one resource, because I would imagine most of you all listening can probably attest to this. The number one person we let down the most is usually ourselves. We let ourselves off the hook. We will make a commitment and then say, oh, I didn't do it today, but I will tomorrow. And then tomorrow turns into 2 months. Hence why I'm doing 30 days of videos in September to kick off my YouTube channel, because I have said for a year, I was going to start my YouTube channel to accompany my podcast. And I have not. So I need to do something big, right?
No, you have.
I have now.
You have now.
Yes. Thank you. Yes.
Don't honor yourself. I will never let you not honor yourself. You're doing it. We're doing the work now.
Yes. Thank you.
This is what accountability looks like.
Absolutely.
And it's also why you invited people to come and host you, because you said, okay, if people are coming to host me, this is the tool and mechanism that I am using for myself to be accountable. So even within your own practices, you're embodying the work that needs to be done, right? You're asking the questions of yourself that need to be asked, which are, what are the things I need to put in place to safeguard me from taking this train off the tracks? Because if it was just 30 days of you by yourself, it might have been 27.
It might have been 3.
It might, so it's like, but you're doing it. Yes. You're doing it. And you are the example. I always believe in being the example of the change you want to see. Because I think we live in a world where we mirror each other. So you're always running into a version of yourself, either higher or lower vibrationally, but you're always running into some version of yourself. And so it's like, now you are creating the energy, like you just leveled up your energy by doing the thing that you said you're going to do and doing it very well. So it's like, no, you're doing it. This is accountability.
Yeah.
And I think this is what's also required for accountability, is that ability to be introspective and to self-assess and to say, okay, I know that when my days get long, I am quick to be like, I don't want to do this today. So what things can I put in place that will make that harder for me to do? And like you said, it's the people. It is community.
Right.
You on it. You got it. You're doing it.
You said that beautifully, Dr. Shay. That's exactly it. That's it. And to your point, thank you. Thank you for being a part of my accountability tribe for this process. Very much appreciate it. Yes. And so that's it. So people, I would say, is the number one. And then the last, and I'll just give 2, because the simpler we can keep things, the better. Yeah. The second thing I would say is know your long-term goals. And long-term doesn't have to be 5 years. I mean, can, but know your long-term goals is in a month, right? Because the month goal has to be broken down into week and day. So there's shorter term goals. Know it for 3 months, know it for 6 months, know it for a year. And then every morning, rewrite your goals. Now, if you have 35, you might want to pick the top 5, right? But rewrite your goals, because it resets in your mind and it helps you recommit and it refreshes. We're human. We forget stuff. We are inundated with stuff all the time. But if we continually remind ourselves by rewriting our goal every single morning, top 5, top 10 goals, writing it out. So it takes you 10 minutes. Is that 10 minutes worth the brain starting to focus differently at the start of the day to keep you on track towards your goals than the quote unquote 10 minutes is going to take you, which could result, if you don't do it, in doing a lot of busy work instead of productive work or revenue producing activities. So those would be the two things I would say, because the writing helps to remind us, and the people obviously are so valuable. So that is what I'd say.
Awesome. That was great. That was great. So I know we're starting to wrap up now. I just want to take a quick time to kind of just summarize some of the things that we discussed today. And I have one final question for you before us to wrap up.
Okay.
So when we talk about accountability, what I'm hearing from you is that how we define accountability is really a measure of our ability to be transparent and our integrity, right? So how often are we able to show up as our authentic selves and stand in that, owning the results of the actions that we take? And then if we look at, really what type of tools and mechanisms can we use to help enforce accountability in our lives, I think, like you said, first and foremost is really about community. It's really about building a community around the goals that you're pursuing and allowing that tribe to hold you accountable to whoever it is that you said that you wanted to be. And then also, you also spoke about, in addition to community, you also spoke about, you got to remind me again, I just had it and I lost it.
What was the last Rewriting. Rewrite your goals.
Right, yes, and the reinforcement. That's what I was saying in my mind, the reinforcement. Yes, so it's the reinforcement of that belief. So those two components between community and reinforcing this future version of yourself are great tools that you can use to help hold yourself accountable, which is, again, being transparent and maintaining the integrity. So last but not least, as we wrap up, for anyone who's out there who may be struggling with accountability or looking to just get better at holding themselves accountable, what is one final tip that you want to leave our viewers with today?
Be humble. Accountability requires humility, and it requires that you ask for help, and it requires that you receive help. And as Dr. Shea, as you've said, community requires humility. In order to be in community and relationship with people healthy, it requires humility. So be humble enough to ask for and to give others accountability, and you will see a complete difference in your productivity, in the results that you get, and also in the joy that you get in interacting with people, because you get to celebrate together when you do great things.
Yeah, I love that. That was such a positive way to end our podcast today. Well, thank you, Kanishi, for joining us today. It was definitely a pleasure to learn more about you and to discuss accountability. I think this is a topic that we can all learn more about and to continue to practice every day in our lives. So for all the viewers who joined in, thanks for tuning in, and I wish you guys an amazing day. Thanks.